Hello and welcome to Silverstone, the home of the British Grand Prix, the 8th round of the FIA Formula One World Championship, on an absolutely glorious afternoon. And we've got Silverstone at capacity. They're here to see one man, that's Damon Hill. He won pole position. He won it in the closing minutes of Saturday's qualification, and what an occasion it was. Well, these are the scenes earlier on Saturday, and Damon Hill anxious indeed to overcome the problems he had on Friday morning when an assembly problem caused some embarrassment. There you see it. Parts of the front suspension on both sides of Hill's Williams were not attached to the chassis. That was the result. An embarrassing moment. It was a human error. It's one of those things regrettably can happen. But that was Friday morning. Damon ran back to the pits. He expressed his opinions, I think, in a fairly clear, concise manner. Let's look at it again. And the car completely out of Damon Hill's controls. It's hopping along. And Damon, I don't think, realised or knew what was going on. Well, those are the first time session times. Michael Schumacher, Barrichello, Katayama, and all the way down to 26th. But of course then comes Saturday, a fine day, and Damon Hill, really, I mean, that's a smiling Damon Hill. We didn't see much of that until the end of Saturday's qualification. But it was Ferraris that brought pride and joy to Italy. Forget about football. It was here at Silverstone. Jos Verstappen showing again how easy it is. One little error to spin a Benetton Ford, and he's been off more than once here this weekend at Silverstone. But it was this man, Damon Hill, unhappy with press comments about his driving, his position. He's not immune to spinning, by the way. You see, this is at Club Corner. On the exit, a little pirouette. Just kisses the gravel bed, throws gravel on the circuit. But Michael Schumacher, the man most people, I suspect, had expected to be on pole position. Jean Alesi and his Ferrari fought valiantly, but really overshadowed most of the weekend and in qualification by teammate Gerhard Berger. The two Sauber Mercedes-Benz, David Coulthard showing also he can get his Williams Renault off the track. So fairly action-packed days of qualification and practicing at Silverstone. Of course, the circuit is new, and part of the problem that a number of teams and drivers have, talking about problems, that's Olivier Panis in his Ligier. And actually, that was a pirouette which was done in harmony with Michele Alboreto, because Alboreto spun at that same point. Panis had a sympathy spin. But now back to the man who did end up in pole position, and there is his team boss, Frank Williams. Well, that was the situation at the end of Friday afternoon. I think the talking point principally was that of Ferrari, because they went out at the very end of that session and rather stunned most of the pit lane. We've seen improvements from Ferrari throughout this 94 season. So now, continuing through into the second day, and this was ultimately to be the hour for Damon Hill. And it, I think, in Damon's mind, set to rights both the comment that he's been subjected to between Manucourt and the British Grand Prix, and I think also his driving on Saturday was a message. Well, that's not the message that the team wanted to see. That was the message that occurred first thing on Friday morning, but Damon Hill got back into the Williams on Saturday afternoon and put it on pole.
Mistake.
Ce que j'espère, c'est voir une course nettement meilleure qu'au Grand Prix de France. De toute manière, ça ne va pas être trop difficile parce qu'au Grand Prix de France, c'était vraiment très mauvais. Et là, j'espère déjà, on est dans le jardin de McLaren, donc les voitures devraient être pas mal. Et puis, notre moteur, c'est le V2, donc on sait qu'il fonctionne bien. Donc,
in McLaren's garden,
aux bonnes
the
performances.
car should run well, of course, and we're running an Evolution 2 engine. So Mika Häkkinen going on to 5th place on the grid, the 3rd row of the grid. And David Coulthard here qualifying in 7th position, not being happy with the setup of his car on Saturday afternoon. Jean Alesi, 4th fastest, but all eyes were on Damon Hill. And what a qualifying session that was, John.
Well, I think it's the finest session that we've seen this season, and well, I hope it's something for the future, because we are at the halfway point of the 94 season. We've seen domination from the Benetton Ford team. We've seen the tragedy that Williams went through in Imola. We're seeing them coming out of that. They're coming to terms with FW16. But Kia Katayama in the Tyrrell, a man who also very impressive indeed, 8th quickest after the 2 days of qualifying. But you know, the circuit is new at Silverstone. The majority of the corners have been changed. You've got to find out what the limit is, and part of the finding out process is in fact sometimes going too quickly. Well, you want to do all that during the 3-day test period, not during the 2 days of practice and qualifying.
Damon Hill, not only the responsibility of the Williams team, he thinks, rests on his shoulder. Also, there are roughly 80,000 people here, and most of them are cheering for Damon Hill. Michael Schumacher, during the 2nd qualifying, gave it a big try, a big effort, said he got held up by Alboreto, but added to that, well, I suppose Damon got held up as well, so it's pretty fair.
Well, we're seeing, I think, just about everybody who spun over the course of 2 days. That was the thing, the spin I mentioned a few minutes ago, Pennies. That's the other view of the spin, and it really was Michele Alboreto who forced Panis into that very synchronized spin. In the meantime, Frank Williams in the pits, Michael Schumacher in the pits, John Alesi illustrates that even a Ferrari can spin in the hands of John Alesi, and it's a rare sight to see Alesi in that situation. But really, in these closing moments of Saturday qualification, the track was alive. It was just superb. Eddie Irvine also came across Michele Alboreto and Luffield won. He wasn't very happy, but this was the moment that we wondered what was wrong with Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. Well, we may cut back somewhere in this review of what happened. He actually clipped the barrier on the exit of the pit lane, and he damaged one of those mighty expensive BBS wheels that Ferrari and Benetton use, and eventually he spun to a standstill before he could get it back to the pits.
Damon Hill, his 4th career pole position here in Silverstone. Yes, you've got it, Damon. There we see the grid as we are starting the British Grand Prix in about 10 minutes time. We'll be back after the break with the British Grand Prix here on Eurosport. The British Grand Prix at Silverstone, 61 laps around a revised circuit, which has got a lot of praise from most of the drivers, and all of the drivers in fact, and this is how they will start. On pole position, his 4th career pole, Damon Hill. Then 0.003 of a second after him, Michael Schumacher. An all Ferrari 2nd row. Then it's Mika Häkkinen in 5th, and Rubens Barrichello, the fastest Jordan, in 6th. David Coulthard 7th, and his best qualifying position in 8th, that's Ukio Katayama. Brundle and Verstappen 9th and 10th, and 11th through to 14th are Blundell, Irvine, Heinz-Harald Frentzen on his Friday afternoon time, and Pierluigi Martini. Oliver Pennis and Gianni Morbidelli share the next row in front of Michele Alboreto and Andrea de Cesaris. Zanardi, the fastest Lotus, with behind him Johnny Herbert and 20th and 22nd, Christian Fittipaldi and Eric Gomez. And the full grid is made up by Jean-Marc Coulon, just behind teammate David Brabham. 61 laps, John. It's hotter than this morning. It's going to be, let's say, an interesting race, because no one is going to say anything about pit stops.
And also, of course, with the revisions to the circuit, no one knows what the reaction they will get from their tyres is. Now, I spoke with Goodyear shortly before we came on air, and from their point of view, they need one change of tyres from a wear point of view. Two is an option which may suit some people. Allard, you said you don't think anybody's looking at a three-stop race. Well, we didn't think that in Manicourt either, but Benetton and Ferrari planned it. And what I talked about this morning and what happened here on Saturday morning was, you see the pit lane on picture there? Michael Schumacher came into that pit lane at racing speed. Hardly any difference in speed from the actual racetrack itself. He then got on the brakes in an emergency slowing down process, so that when he went through the speed limit beam, he didn't exceed 120 kilometers per hour. The Benetton Ford team, I think, could consider it. The drawback, of course, is here at Silverstone, the entry to the pit lane itself and the exit, for example, are much longer than they are in the French Grand Prix at Manicourt. So it's going to be a gamble. The other factor of Manicourt, which we didn't know at the time, but we've learned since, is in fact that Benetton had two race strategies available. One was the one that they actually played out, but the other was that had they not got the lead of the race, or had the battle for the lead been more intense, they could have done a two-stop race as their competitors did. So the focus of strategy has to be once again on Benetton, but I would believe and imagine that most other people will opt for a two-stop race. How they implement those two stops, we don't know. Some might stop a little earlier than others, but the majority, I feel, will make the two-stop race.
Well, we are having a look at the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship points. Not on the grid at the moment is Alessandro Zanardi. His Lotus, I believe, is at the end of the pit lane, or maybe that's then the spare car. Alessandro, anyway, hasn't taken up his allocated slot on the grid. Well, you've seen it on your screen. Michael Schumacher has got 66 points, Damon Hill 29, and Gerhard Berger in third position on 17. But all eyes will be on the start. Can Damon Hill manage, John, to get into... Oh, it's Princess Diana. Can Damon Hill get into that first corner first?
Well, he's got pole position. He is nearest to the corner. But of course, as last weekend, he also was in the front row of the grid, also on pole position. And he was out-sprinted into that first corner by Michael Schumacher. Schumacher's one position nearer to the corner than Manicourt. And as David Coulthard said during the race in France, the way the Benetton sprinted off the line, it was reminiscent of the days when cars had traction control. Now, of course, traction control is illegal, but Schumacher is making stunning starts these days.
The start of the warm-up lap for the 1994 British Grand Prix. All the 25 cars are gone from their grid position. The only one that wasn't on the grid is Alessandro Zanardi, who was left behind in the pits and will start the race from the pit lane because Zanardi did not take up his allocated place on the grid.
Well, great aerial view of the Silverstone circuit. This is Beckett's, the three corners that make up Beckett's these days, down through Chapel Curve and then on to the long hanger straight. It's here, or alternatively the Pitts straight, which are the quickest parts of the Silverstone circuit these days. And top speed that we saw was around about 185 miles an hour. That was Gerhard Berger on Friday afternoon in qualifying. Now major revision at Stowe, down through Vale, further modification into the left-hand part of Club, much wider than it was before. Great opportunities to overtake. Then the second part of Club, unchanged. Of course, a lot more gravel beds, revised curbing all around the circuit. Now coming up into further changes to the circuit. This is up into Abbey. Michael Schumacher rather cheekily accelerating ahead as he comes up now out of Abbey, under the bridge, into Bridge Corner, and into the final big change here for the 94 British Grand Prix at Silverstone, Priory Corner. And this is a corner where drivers have found it quite difficult. Now look at the gamesmanship that Schumacher's playing. He's allowed Damon to go way ahead. He's dropped back. He wants to have a bit of a clear road. He wants to make sure that his tyres are as clean as possible. There have been additional races here since the morning warm-up. There is more rubber on the circuit. He wants to have the maximum possible advantage to try and out-accelerate Damon Hill into Copse Corner. Copse, of course, a much slower entry than in previous years. He wants to be in there first, and as I said in all our broadcasts over this weekend, he who gets into Copse first is going to have a big advantage.
The cars lining up on the grid. Well, John, Michael Schumacher has laid a lot of rubber down when he got away from the dummy grid, so to say, and some people think that is the trick for his brilliant starts. Because he's got some rubber down, he seems to have more grip than anybody else off the line.
Well, I mean, it's like the old the present day of drag racing. You put rubber down.
David Coulthard has told the engine. David Coulthard has told the engine.
And there's a red flag. It's an aborted
delayed start. So David's got to start from the back of the grid.
Well, that's a great shame indeed. If David Coulthard was unfortunate enough to have the engine stall. So we've had the 5-minute signal going up, and that car will have to be restarted. Now, of course, all the team personnel have made their way back to the pits. It means they've now all got to make their way back onto the grid, go through the same process again. This is just further tension, and I mean, it's agonizing, particularly for Damon Hill, who's on pole position. Michael Schumacher, likewise, who's intent on getting into Copse first. David Coulthard sitting back on the 4th row of the grid was the man who put his hands up to indicate that his engine had stalled. So the process will take place, and then the Grand Prix will get underway. 1 lap less than the 61 racing laps. So this is a moment when everybody, when you're sitting in a car at this point, you're almost at the point of being on a plane, which is surreal. Suddenly you come back off it again, and all those tensions that you felt you're experiencing
are flooding back. Damon Hill
certainly will be aware of what Michael Schumacher was doing, and I suspect when they make the next parade lap, he'll keep a very clear eye on what Schumacher's up to. The gamesmanship, the psychology that's going on, all part of Formula One, and I must say, I enjoy watching it.
So just under 5 minutes to go while we're watching Gerhard Berger talking to one of his Austrian friends, Karl-Heinz John. And there's the man who caused the delay, David Coulthard. And could that be nerves, John?
It could be nerves, or it could just be the engine just sort of gave a little hot cough or hiccup. But the problem is that all the teams that are at the far end of the pit lane, to make their way down to where the grid is in relation to where their team are, is quite a long way. So they were rushing back up the pit lane. For example, Jordan and other teams who are at the far end of the Silverstone pit lane have had to run all the way back, get the equipment onto the grid, then once the cars are under starters orders again, then rush all the way back up again, and the same thing could happen again.
Well, the last Formula 3000 race in Barcelona, I think it took 4 goes in the end to get the race underway. Let's hope it's not the same here. So the race, as John said, 60 laps instead of 61. And there's David Coulthard. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there'll be someone standing in front of the car with a flag until everybody is gone on the parade lap, and David will start behind both the cars on the last row of the grid. Well, Rubens Barrichello in front of him. Is there work done on Mika Häkkinen's car, or is that all standard routine?
Well, looking down, we're looking at Rubens Barrichello's car from the commentary booth, and they've got fans and large trunking ducting which is blowing cold air down onto the top of the engine through the airbox to ensure that there's no fuel vaporization. Of course, even on a parade lap, these engines get very hot, and in fact, in some occasions, parade laps are worse than racing laps because there's not enough air going through the radiators and air boxes on the radiators to keep the engine temperature in control. So when you come to a stop, the heat soak just goes upwards, and of course all around the fuel system on the top of the V of a V10 or a V8 or a V12 engine, and fuel vaporization has been the bugbear of many a racing engine for very many years.
So we're waiting for the 3-minute sign, I think, John, isn't it, to start going, or have we had the 3-minute sign, and are we waiting for the 1 minute and everybody to pack away the tyre warmers?
Well, Michael Schumacher has just fired up his Benetton Ford, and the Benetton team now making their way off the grid as we still look down onto David Coulthard's car, and David will be, I think, fairly relaxed about it. It's one of those things that happens. It's slightly embarrassing, and as you say, Allard, the man now with the flag courageously stands in front of David Coulthard, and he will have to wait until 24 cars, well, not in fact in his case, but certainly 18 or so cars stream past, and then he will take up position at the back of the grid.
The second parade lap, and there are problems for not only David Coulthard, who has to wait, but Johnny Herbert gets underway.
And he's going to have to start, I think, at the back of the grid. I don't think he will be allowed to take position, though he seems to be trying to. So David, oh, look at that. David Coulthard drops the clutch as some of the team personnel are making their way across, and well, it's very tense right now, but David Coulthard catching up to the tail end of the field. It'll be interesting to see what Johnny Herbert does, because in theory, if your car stalls or you have a problem getting away, you're not allowed to take up your place in the grid, except if all the cars, oh, well, there's some of the cars still behind you.
Yes, and I think Jean-Marc Gounon was kind enough to wait until Johnny got underway, so I think Johnny is allowed to pick up his grid position, but we'll see.
Well, there's Michael Schumacher once again, and he's done the very same thing, and that is a Jordan. That is a great shame. I don't know what has happened, but a major engine problem. Eddie Irvine, well, that is disappointment beyond belief for Eddie Irvine in his first British Grand Prix, and that is boiling like a kettle. And there is an Audi stationary in the pit lane waiting for his opportunity to take the start, but he will not be permitted to do so until the last car has filed past the exit to pit lane. And well, poor Eddie Irvine, it's a weekend that he looked forward to. Indeed, he was delighted with the performance of his Jordan Hart here throughout, and hoped to get once again up into the points.
So plenty of things happening on the warm-up laps. David Coulthard, John, he was the fastest man in the morning warm-up this morning, so he was looking forward to a very good race, a race he has to start at the back of the grid. We are on board Michael Schumacher, who's alongside Damon Hill. There we see them, Damon Hill on the right, and John, there's more black lines now for Damon Hill as well, and even more for Michael Schumacher, where they have to go. When David Coulthard is stationary, we will see a green flag, and there's a lot of blue smoke coming from Martin Brundle's McLaren right in front of us. Well, that's not supposed to be there, John, I think.
Not at all, and that looks ominous indeed for Martin Brundle. That's a lot of oil smoke now. It may be simply a very small amount of oil dripping onto exhaust, but it is increasing with RPM.
And the red light is on, and who is making the best start again? It's Michaels. No, it's Damon Hill. Damon Hill's got the best start.
And Martin Brundle's engine or something has caught fire. The car has been pulled off to the left of the circuit, but Damon Hill got into Copse first. He consolidated that pole position, but there was drama for Martin Brundle with that engine. He had to pull straight off the circuit and is out of his British Grand Prix.
Damon Hill leads, Michael Schumacher. Then it's a Ferrari, Rubens Barrichello, another Ferrari, and Jos Verstappen.
Well, great start for Damon Hill. That was the start he dreamt about. He has made that dream reality, and he's able to hold the lead. Michael Schumacher, we know, mighty quick through Beckett's now. One of the two Tyrrells pulling up alongside Mika Häkkinen coming into Stowe. There didn't look to be an awful lot of room. Well, still side by side, fighting the way all the way down through Vale into Club, but Damon Hill has the advantage. Michael Schumacher, but it's on this part of the circuit, Allard, that we've seen over 2 days that the Benetton, Ford and Schumacher are so strong.
So the whole field, minus Martin Brundle and Eddie Irvine, already going under bridge or through bridge, under the bridge, into that new infield section. And let's see the gap between race leader Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. They're already leaving the Ferraris and the rest of the field behind. So this is a battle for the moment between the Williams Renault of Damon Hill and World Championship leader Michael Schumacher.
Well, the gap between Damon Hill and Schumacher just under a second, 0.895. Gerhard Berger third, Barrichello fourth, Alesi, and the rest stream through.
So behind Jos Verstappen, who came from 10th on the grid, it's Mika Häkkinen, who then did not have a very good start because Mika qualified in 5th position. And there we see the rest of the top 6 on our screens. And so far, let's see, good start also from Andrea de Cesaris, John, up to 12th position, and Johnny Herbert up to 14th. Look again at the start. It looked like Michael Schumacher, but then there was wheel spin.
But look at that. That was what we were watching. That was a massive, massive display of fireworks from Martin Brundle's Peugeot engine, and you see poor Martin immediately pulls over to the left, and 2 British drivers out before we've even completed the lap. Eddie Irvine on the second parade lap. Martin Brundle literally, look, there it is, gives it, oh, well, I have never, I think, seen a Formula 1 engine before behaved like that, and that is very disappointing indeed for the McLaren team. Obviously Peugeot embarrassed, I would say, by that performance, and there Martin Brundle's face says it all. What have I got to do to be a winner at Silverstone?
Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher by 1.1 seconds. Then it's Gerhard Berger in 3rd place, and still Rubens Barrichello in 4th. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think after 2 laps a Jordan has ever been in 4th position.
Well, I think in 93 Barrichello ran 3rd at Donington in that wet race. I don't know. But anyway, Rubens Barrichello, the remaining Jordan Hart, and he's trapped between Berger and Alesi, and I can't say that's maybe the most comfortable place to be, but there's sufficient gap between Berger and Alesi, so Rubens not under pressure from Alesi, but obviously pushing and trying to keep contact with Berger. Ferrari, they've decided to take out or not run those latest engines they had used throughout qualifying. They've got the standard 65-degree V12 as opposed to the new engines that they ran. So straight line performance probably not as great as we saw through the qualifying sessions. Nonetheless, it's a difficult car to pass in a straight line.
On board Michael Schumacher, and you see the Williams of Damon Hill ahead of him, a second ahead of him roughly at the end of lap 3, and behind Michael Schumacher is the big gap to Gerhard Berger. Progress of David Coulthard at the moment in 18th, and that's after 2 laps.
Well, the pace that Damon Hill is setting and is being matched by Michael Schumacher is about 1.5 seconds faster than anybody else, and they're just pulling away from the rest. It's Damon Hill is some 7 seconds ahead of 3rd place man Gerhard Berger. There you see Berger just coming into view as Damon Hill virtually reaches the end of Hanger Straight, and that's on the 4th lap.
John, Rubens Barrichello in between the Ferraris, but the good thing for Rubens is that Alesi's dropped back some 1.7 seconds from the Jordan, so he's not in immediate danger.
And look at the gap that's opened up. Panis in 11th. Blundell, you can barely see him coming onto the straight. There's Damon Hill into this new sequence of corners at Abbey. Out of it, Abbey dropped down the hill, flat out under bridge. Then as soon as you exit bridge, you've got to get your car well over to the right, brake for the entry into Priory Corner. Being neat and tidy through Priory and Brooklands really is the most important thing. There are corners that pay for tidy driving, exuberant driving. You slide around and you can spin.
4 laps completed. Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher after 4 laps by 1.2 seconds and sets a new fastest lap in doing so, 1:27.859. Top 6, top 7 in fact unchanged. Katsuyama, Frentzen and Morbidelli bringing up the top 10. And John, the 2 leaders riding with the man in second place are over a second quicker at this moment than anybody else.
Well, I wonder, Allard, what we're saying is Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher just run away from the bulk of the field. Is this an indication of what the tactics these teams are going to do for these 2 particular drivers? To be able to pull away so quickly, the cars, in my view, would have to be slightly lighter than the remaining field. And I just wonder, has the Williams team decided to do something a bit more radical than they would normally do? We know that Benetton are quite liable to do something, but the speed at which they're pulling away indicates that to me.
We're on lap 5 out of 60, and Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher during the British Grand Prix. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back here on Eurosport. We're on lap 7 of the British Grand Prix, and the gap between race leader Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher is 1.1 seconds. Then it's a further 10.7 seconds to Gerhard Berger in third. Fourth, still Rubens Barrichello. Fifth, Jean Alesi. And in sixth position, Jos Verstappen. And the progress of David Coulthard, he is now in 12th position. That's not bad after 6 laps, John.
Well, I think with the equipment that David has and the performance he gave us this morning in that 30-minute unofficial session, and as you point out, he's lapping 1 minute 28.111, and that's actually quicker on the 6th lap than race leader Damon Hill achieved. So Coulthard very fired up indeed, and well, stung by stalling his engine on the grid. And the beauty of starting literally at the back, if there ever can be a beauty, is that you totally free your mind. You think, I'm just going to drive this car however I feel. Any preconceptions about race strategy, forget it. I'm just going to go flat out. And that's really, if you could do that all the time, I'm sure you'd see better results from everybody.
The gap now, a 1/10 of a second more between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. And the gap with Gerhard Berger, John, is growing almighty big. They're lapping 3 seconds a lap quicker than Berger.
Well, going back to the thing about strategy, if they are running on a low fuel load in these opening laps, their tyre performance, of course, is going to be much better than, say, the Ferraris, the Jordan, and in the case of Verstappen in the second Benetton. So I suspect that what's happened is that we're looking at a man who's looking at a 2-stop race, Gerhard Berger, probably the same for Rubens Barrichello and Jean Alesi. But I believe, and I'm going to take a gamble, that Hill and Schumacher might attempt something different to the bulk of the field. It's a big gamble, a big risk. Benetton, I know, have tried making entries into the pit lane at virtual racing speed. I didn't see anybody else do that. So they've investigated every option. We have to wait and see.
Top 8 unchanged, and apart from David Coulthard in 12th, who's doing a 27.889, all the other drivers are lapping 29s or even less than that. Again, a 1/10 of a second quicker, Damon Hill on lap 8, so the gap now 1.3 seconds. And there we see Gerhard Berger crossing the line. Gerhard is now 16.1 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill. Well, John, I think one of the good things here at Silverstone is that the Ferraris were on the pace.
Well, they were, I think, helped greatly by this revised V12 engine that they used in qualifying. I mean, it was just dynamite, particularly in Friday and closing minutes of that session, and certainly through Saturday qualifying. Very, very quick indeed. But they reverted back to the more reliable and proven 65-degree engine. The new engine's got a different angle of V for that V12. So the engine not as powerful. Of course, in qualifying you can do things. We've seen Renault introducing a revised version of their RS6 engine for qualifying. Do we know if they're going to run that in the race, or is it still considered very much a qualifying engine?
At the moment, John, I believe it's very much a qualifying engine. Well, Jos Verstappen in 6th. There we see him. It's his 56th motor race ever, after about 560 on karts, by the way.
He's almost a veteran, Allard, with that number of races. Well, we've got a veteran here who just popped into the booth. I know Derek Warwick doesn't like to be thought of as a veteran because he's still very much an active racing driver. Derek, when are we going to see you back in a racing car?
Well, I hope quite soon. It's been 9 months since I've been out of a race car, and I know I'm getting itchy feet, and it's a long time. So I was going to be here in touring cars, but there was a problem with the team. So I've been wandering around the pit road, and there's a chance I'm going to test for a Formula 1 team at the beginning of next week. So that hopefully will at least give me some miles in a car.
Well, a pretty dramatic start to the Grand Prix. And Derek, you saw what happened. First, David Coulthard stalled. It's a long time since I've actually driven a Grand Prix car on a Grand Prix, but have you ever had a stalled car on a grid? And what sort of feelings and emotions did you go through?
Are you telling me you've never made that mistake?
I made that mistake, but it's a time probably you were still in short pants.
Well, obviously when you do it, I mean, you're obviously frustrated, but the good thing when I remember stalling the car is you didn't go to the back of the grid. You didn't have that penalty, which I do believe actually is a good penalty. I think if you make a mistake, you stall the car, or whether it's your fault or not, you should carry the penalty to go to the back.
And then, of course, drama for Martin Brundle. He started the race. We saw smoke coming from the back of that McLaren Peugeot engine. He got the car into gear, he floored the throttle, and all of a sudden it went off like a hand grenade. And so disappointment for your former teammate, I think, at Jaguar.
Yeah, I think it's a shame for Martin, because I think he's performed very well this year, and he deserves a bit of luck. And as he climbed into his car just now, he said to me, well, you know, obviously he hopes to finish the race because he could do with a good finish. I think he's done very well under the pressure of not knowing whether he's going to be in the Grand Prix in the next race. And, you know, as you see in Magny-Cours, it was exactly the same, obviously, but he never got as far.
No, but looking at Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher just sprinting away from Gerhard Berger, coming back to this subject of strategy, give us your views on what you think Williams and Benetton are doing at this point in the race.
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Williams in particular to go the whole race with just one stop. I think they will be two stopping, and probably Benetton as well. So they'll be watching each other to see whether they dive into the pit road. But I think the most noticeable thing here this weekend is the confidence that Damon's had. I think since Magny-Cours, since the introduction of Nigel, I think he's grown in stature. I think he's got more confidence. He made a bit of verbal abuse to the team on Thursday, and I think the team now will start listening to him. He's been in many people's eyes the test driver come good, and I think now he's made his own mark, and I think now he's had a lot of pressure all year with Ayrton and various other bits and pieces, and I think he's just come right forward now. And
the respect will follow from the team.
Yeah, and he deserves that respect because, you know, he's had some good races, a lot of pressure. He's the only other man to win a race this year. And the car, you can see, is not an easy car to drive. It's very nervous, especially if you look at someone like Schumacher. And, you know, although he's pulling away here slightly, you can't help but feel that Michael's just biding his time.
Well, we've been watching a battle here, Mark Blundell, David Coulthard, and that's been thick and fast. And we've seen, in fact, for the first time in motor racing, overtaking, competitive overtaking. That's something I'm delighted to see. And I'm sure everybody at home watching on Eurosport will have the same feelings. But Coulthard really just lining himself up to get into the slipstream of Mark Blundell in his Tyrrell Yamaha. But Uncle Ken, you know, he always sets his cars up to be fast in a straight line. And David's going to have to do a little bit of thinking now to find a way past Mark. He's not going to want to give up his 9th place to a young 23-year-old.
Mark Blundell in 9th currently. David Coulthard up into 10th position. the gap between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, and yet at the end of lap 12, incidentally, is 1.4 seconds. Damon, I think, having a bit of an off lap, 1:27.8, or maybe they are already... No traffic as yet. Whoa.
Well, David ran a little bit wide in Prairie, and that's more a degree of anxiousness than anything else. In the meantime, there is the first car to be lapped, Jean-Marc Gounon, between race leader Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher in second place, but that's not a problem. Schumacher will be up past, in fact, barely out of the corner, and Schumacher was well past. But I think Gounon, well aware that the leaders were coming through, and probably fell over himself, not getting in their way.
Next man to be lapped is David Brabham in the other MTV Syntec. One of the many cars being powered by a Ford HB engine.
Well, it's important here for Damon to place himself in such a way that he can get past David Brabham without losing momentum, and then also try to use David Brabham to impede the progress of Michael Schumacher. That's part of the skill and art of being a racing driver. Being fast is only one part of that.
So Damon safely through before Copse, and Michael has got to wait a little while there is smoke, and that's Eric Comas, another Ford HB user.
A short race for Eric Comas and a smoky end to that Ford V8 LaRousse, and that was on the exit of Copse. We saw the smoke haze there, and then the picture turned around and made it clear.
So we're on lap 14, John, and pit stop expected within a couple of laps. Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger and Rubens Barrichello in fourth. We'll be back after the break here on Eurosport very soon. Welcome back, riding with Michael Schumacher in second place, 1.7 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill on the previous lap, but well, he's behind a Ligier with a Renault engine, and that is Eric Bernard. I suppose you could call him half a teammate, John.
Well, I don't know if Damon would say that, but certainly he will look for a little bit of cooperation. He'll not want to be fighting at this point in the race. And in car...
Oh, it's Damon Hill in the pits. Damon Hill, the first man in the pits, so that would probably be a three-stop race, I think, John.
Well, it's a big risk, but I'm going to put it down on my sheet of paper and see, as we know from the time, that's a pretty quick pit stop. So I would expect him to be back in probably in another 16 or so laps, which could indicate 3 stops. Now, the part of the event that I'm on, Damon got very, very wide, almost a repeat of what we saw Berger do on Saturday afternoon when he clobbered the barrier on that pit lane exit. Comes in just ahead of Rubens Barrichello, who is in 4th place. But watch Michael Schumacher, because what he did on the entry to pit lane a couple of times on Saturday morning was come in so quickly. One of the two Ligiers did the same thing, but he went through, I would say, the speed trap well in excess of 120 kilometers per hour.
Well, John, Damon's lap, including going into the pits, was a 1:34.8. And let's just see what his outlap is, and then we know how much time he's losing on a total pit stop.
Well, Damon now right in the thick of traffic. He's got Barrichello on his gearbox. He's going to have to once again put a lap on Jean-Marc Gounon, because Gounon unlapped himself in the time Damon was in the pits having fresh tyres and more fuel. And that will not be a problem, but of course it's always an irritation when you see a car and you know that every car ahead of you, particularly a lap car, potentially can hold you up. As race leader Michael Schumacher, 24.9 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger in second, Damon Hill in third, Barrichello fourth, Alesi fifth, and Jos Verstappen in the second, Benetton sixth.
But race leader Michael Schumacher now 25 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger and Damon Hill. His outlap was a 52.9, and that's a Tyrrell coming into the pits while we are there it is, Mark Blundell.
Allard, one of the things I'm sure that the Benetton team in particular are doing is they've seen Williams expose their hand, they've introduced a strategy. They may be in a position, as they were in France 1 week ago, to opt for two different strategies. They may well now decide, if they think Williams are going to go for 3, they may decide just to go for 2. Schumacher may take advantage of the lead, try and... He's in the pits. Well, in on lap 17, so much for my theories and for the potential variation that the Benetton team might have been implementing. So Michael Schumacher, let's see how quick he is in and out. The fuel nozzle in, wheels, tires off, back on. Anything more than 7 seconds, well, 6 point, well, you can just see the nozzle came out just under 6 seconds, so that's going to mean a very similar view to the race from Benetton as we've seen from Williams.
Well, the lap was quicker in comparison to Damon Hill's lap, and Damon Hill will now be behind Michael Schumacher. There we see it, because Schumacher's in-lap was a 1:32.4, and that was 2.4 seconds quicker than Damon did.
Well, I think that came because Schumacher practiced those runs in the first part of the pit lane. He came in absolutely gangbusters. David Coulthard in the second Williams now in the pits, and we may get a view again from the length of time that fuel nozzle's attached as to what their strategy is going to be for David Coulthard. Fairly similar to Damon Hill, but the reason in my mind that Michael Schumacher now leads this Grand Prix is because they took the opportunity on Saturday morning to come into the pit lane ever so quickly. Then when they get to the actual pit lane itself, brake, make sure he doesn't exceed the speed limit, and that's where those 2 seconds have come from.
In the meantime, we have a new race leader, Gerhard Berger. Interestingly, Gerhard, well, maybe is on a 2-stop race and could be in the lead. Schumacher could catch up, Damon could catch up, and we'll have a real fight for the lead then. While it's busy in the pits at the moment, there's quite a few cars coming in to the pits. Not race leader Gerhard Berger, who completes lap 18.
Derek, this is getting a little bit fraught now, because people have eventually got to decide at what point they're going to show their strategy. With pit stops and refueling, I mean, is this something that you think is good for Formula One? Or I know a lot of drivers expressed concern at the beginning of the year, but if you're in Gerhard Berger's position, what would you be feeling right now?
I think pit stops are good for Formula One. I think that makes it more interesting as us to watch, as something to talk about. It's for the viewer to look at and get interested in. I think it just adds to it. And I think the strategy is so fantastic. I mean, Damon said last week it was the Benetton's pit strategy that beat them in the race, and I think he's right. And there's going to come more and more into it. And like you just said, the way that Schumacher came into the pit road then, he's obviously been practicing that all weekend, and it's paid off. It's given him the lead of this motor race.
Well, giving them the advantage certainly over Damon Hill, who did lead. Michael, of course, second, but literally on the verge of eclipsing Gerhard Berger, who presently is leading and coming up now to the completion of the 19th lap. Schumacher's got to be careful, because Berger, when he gets the sense of a lead of a Grand Prix, doesn't give it up gently, and he's one of the most difficult men, I think that's the best word to use, to pass on the circuit.
I think the most difficult man. You know, I think it's quite a surprise, really, because if you think of Gerhard, he's normally very, very hard on tyres, and I'm surprised he's still out there. You would think that normally Gerhard's the first man into the pits, because that Ferrari is not particularly easy on tyres.
Well, I think Schumacher's trying to line himself up. He didn't get too close through Beckett so he could get the run through the corner, try and pick up enough of a toe from the Ferrari, but really he can't make up an inch as they come down hanger straight into Stowe. He gets closer through Stowe corner now, a much shorter corner, but again on acceleration and in the run down into Vale, well, he's closed up a small amount, but then as you exit Club, pick up speed, and Schumacher very, very wide. Has he? Well, I think that was an error from Schumacher. And now the run back up into Abbey, not close enough to threaten. And from here all the way down to start-finish straight, really very difficult indeed to do anything. Berger can defend quite easily. You see Schumacher closes right up, but Gerhardt doesn't have to worry that much because he knows that unless Schumacher is foolhardy and takes a shot down the inside, he's not going to have a go.
Talking about closing up, Damon Hill is closing up dramatically on the back tail end of Michael Schumacher. The gap on the previous lap between Schumacher and Hill was 2.2 seconds, but at the start of lap 21 the gap is only 1.3 seconds. So there are 40 laps to go and still no pit stop from Gerhard Berger. Jean Alesi 4th, Barrichello 5th, Häkkinen 6th.
And of course I'm sure this is frustration of a high order for Schumacher because he's on fresh tyres. He wants to make the best of them. He is being frustrated because Berger is holding him up, but he can do nothing about it. The Ferrari is very quick down the straight. You can see that it pulls away just on sheer power. In the corners under braking, Benetton have the advantage. If you lose your momentum, and that's exactly what is happening to Michael Schumacher, it's really playing to the hand of Damon Hill because he's been able to run 0.5 up 0.7 of a second a lap quicker against Schumacher, wider than Berger on the exit of the corner. Now, don't know whether that's the effect of running close to the car ahead of you, causing a little bit of loss of front end downforce, or maybe that's just the line that Schumacher prefers. But Berger was untidy on the exit of Abbey. Schumacher closes up as they come through bridge. Is he going to have a look? Well, he certainly stuck his nose, indicating I might think about it, but I wasn't far enough forward.
So Michael Schumacher trying to find a way past Gerhard Berger, and well, Derek, you said it all. Gerhard is the most difficult man to pass.
Well, he always has been, of course, and the trouble is Michael's losing something like 2 seconds a lap from the pace he was running when he came into the pits. And like we said just now, he must be really frustrated. Now it's going to be the problem because there's a bit of a sandwich going on there, which is going to force Michael's hand a little bit to see whether he can get by Gerhard, which could end up in tears, to be honest, because Gerhard will not let that guy by easily.
Well, Michael Schumacher has got a black flag, lap 22. Well,
I wonder is that from the pit road? It may have been a fine for, or a black flag for exceeding the speed limit, and that is going to change entirely the outcome of this year's British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And well, we don't know what the reason is. We suspect it may be just went through that beam fractionally, well, not fractionally, just too quickly, or got on it too soon at the exit of pit lane.
Well, I haven't seen him doing anything else wrong today, so I suppose it's speeding. A couple of points on your license, well, could cost him a couple of points here in the championship.
What a shame, because we're seeing a fine race between the front three, Berger, Schumacher and Hill, and he's managed to slide under Gerhard Berger, but as he comes across start-finish line, the black flag will be out. And well, Schumacher, we're waiting to see as he comes across Berger into the pit lane. The black flag is out. The number 5 is held out for Schumacher, and the team, of course, will be in contact with him as well to ensure that they are aware as Gerhard Berger vacates his third place as he comes into the pits. Now with 120 kilometers per hour, the speed in the pit lane. And let's watch and see the length of time. A quick pit stop for Ferrari. So this is a 2-stop race for Gerhard Berger. That was lap 22. Well, it's been a dramatic Grand Prix here so far. And to cap it all, Schumacher black flagged. And at the end of this lap, as Flavio Briatore, who is probably incensed beyond belief, walks down to the stewards, to the mark, to find out why have you black flagged Michael Schumacher?
Schumacher, race leader on lap 23.
Well, Schumacher making his way up through bridge into Ferrari once again on the 23rd lap, but this is the lap that he is going to be in, and here we see, oh, very tight indeed, and Damon way over to the left. Berger let Schumacher get through. That was in Prairie, and that was all very fraught and tight. Of course, Berger's tyres probably at the end of the useful life. Hill and Schumacher on fresh tyres. Well, Schumacher has not come into the pits.
Well, he's probably saying to the team, oh, I see a black flag, and the team says, stay out there, we're working on it.
Well, that's possible, but you know, you go past it more than once, you can be in trouble, and more than 3 times, there's no doubt about it. Well, the Benetton team will have the rule book out, and it is being explained to Tom Walkinshaw. You can't quite see who is doing the explanation as to why Schumacher has been black flagged, and well, they've got to keep their man out until they know clearly the reason for that black flag. The gap between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill at the end of lap 23. Roland Brunzerader there in conference, and Mr. Lazzetto from Italy, and Walkinshaw not at all impressed. Well, the gap, by the way, 1.6 seconds.
So this Grand Prix is up to lap 24, the best one I've seen so far this year. Good racing going on. Incidentally, Gerhard Berger, after his pit stop, dropped back to 5th position. So Michael Schumacher leads Damon Hill, Jean Alesi, Mika Häkkinen, Gerhard Berger and Rubens Barrichello in 6th. That's the situation after 24 laps here at Silverstone. We'll be back after the break for more motorsport. Welcome back here at Silverstone, watching Damon Hill, and there is Flavio Briatore. Well, is he or is he not going to come in? That is the question I think we have to ask.
Well, I don't think you have to understand what Flavio is saying. I think his lips said it all. And Tom Walkinshaw now back onto pit wall with Briatore and explaining the situation. Johan Willenplat also up on pit wall. So what is the decision? It appears that the black flag had been taken in, so we now wait and see until Schumacher returns on to start-finish straight. Is he going to get the flag is shown to him once again? Well, they're waiting for him. Nothing at all.
Well, he's completed another lap, and he is leading this British Grand Prix by 2.8 seconds from Damon Hill. Now, Damon's lap times, John, have dropped by about a second. Could it be, I don't know, could it be that Damon is going to go for a 2-stop race, but just made his first stop very early?
He could have done, and it just depends, really. I make the judgment on the amount of fuel that a team puts in, and it may be that they can just eke out a 2-stop race if at the second stop they put sufficient fuel back in to ensure that he gets to the finish. But no team is going to give it away. If you know that Benetton did have 2 strategies available, I'm sure Williams have not been asleep between the French Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix. They will be working out precisely, and in fact it's an ongoing process. Teams are calculating all the time the options that are available to them.
Heinz-Harald Frensen's moved up to 7th position, while you look at the top 6 on the Eurosport screen. David Coulthard now up to 8th, and Katayama 9th, Verstappen in 10th position. And there we see it on our screens. 11th Martini, 12th Fittipaldi, 13th Johnny Herbert, and 14th Michele Alboreto, 1 lap down. And Schumacher in the pits. Michael Schumacher in the pits.
And he came in the pit lane very, very quick. He braked heavily. You could see how fast he came in the pit lane, braked heavily. Now makes his way down to the end of the pit lane, where he will be delayed momentarily.
It's a 5-second penalty for Michael Schumacher. And actually, someone walked into our booth, John, a couple of minutes ago and said, well, apparently it's for jump start, but I didn't see him jump to start. So
and he had a great start. In my judgment, from where we're sitting in the commentary booth, we were not down on the line. I thought it was a great start, no worse or no better than Damon Hill's. But, well, the judges appear to have made a decision that In their view, there was movement before the lights went to green, so we have to bow to that judgment. So Damon Hill not only has got the benefit of the 5 seconds while Schumacher was standing still in the pits, it's the time taken to enter, travel down the pit lane at 120 clicks per hour, and then back up to speed.
John, when Michael Schumacher came in for his pit stop, the lap took him 1:32 and a couple of tenths. This time it took him 1:35.4, which is on par what Damon did during his pit stop. So I would say it was speeding in the pit lane.
Well, if you go through the beam, which is actually at the very beginning of pit lane proper, not the long lead into that pit lane, you can do whatever you like there, but once you get to that particular point where the speed trap is, you go through it too quickly, there'll be something in the post for you. And the post here is delivered by hand by an FIA steward, and it's immediate.
John Alesi was in second place, is in the pits. Now, John, that is his first stop on lap 28.
He could have a one-stop race. Remember, Goodyear were very confident indeed. One stop is all you need, and that is because the wear rate of the rear tyres, they take a lot of punishing now on the revised corners at Silverstone. Mika Häkkinen makes his way back down pit lane. Häkkinen was in fourth. So for many teams, it is going to be just a one-stop race. We have to wait and see what Damon Hill's going to do, because I suspect now that the advantage that he has over Michael Schumacher would indicate that they may revise any plans they had to go beyond 2 stops.
Nearly halfway in this British Grand Prix here at Silverstone, and when Damon Hill crosses the line, he is on lap 29 out of 60. The gap between Damon Hill in first position and Michael Schumacher in third, currently 22.2 seconds. Well, that was on the previous lap. Let's see what it is now. Damon 1:29.7 on that lap, but he got held up by Christian Fittipaldi just a little bit. And as ever in Formula One, a little bit is a lot.
Well, the lot that really the public want to know about, and viewers at home, it's 21 seconds, 20.6 at the end of the last lap between Damon Hill leading this Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher in second place, and that is an awesome task for Michael Schumacher. Well, look, you can see the speed into Beckett's. If this is ever going to be a possessed drive, it is going to come right now from Michael Schumacher. And we, in the booth here with the Tag Heuer computer, we can see on that last lap, Michael Schumacher was 1.6 seconds a lap quicker than Damon Hill, but Damon did get into traffic with Christian Fittipaldi. That gap will stabilize, but Schumacher will charge, and the man right now is so much on top of his game. Well, who's going to say he's not going to run Damon Hill down before we get to lap 60?
Gerhard Berger back into his third position he had before the pit stops. Now some 34.6 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill. There we see the top 6, with again Barrichello in fourth. So apart from Katayama dropping down a bit, the top 6 hasn't changed really much, John.
No, the only man really moving forward is David Coulthard, up to 7th place now, and he's just over 3 seconds behind Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen, of course, just come out of the pits from his stop, so a little battle about, I think, to develop between these two young talents that no doubt will see us all the way through the 90s and into the millennium. No doubt Gerhard Berger will be there in the year 2000. Derek, you know, you've been in motor racing a very long time. It's something very hard to give up. I know how much you love it. What were your feelings when you found yourself really unable to get the kind of seat that you wanted for 94 at the end of the 93 season?
Well, obviously it's very difficult. You know, you sacrificed your whole life for Formula One and to do the job that you love, and then all of a sudden circumstances have ruled you out. It's been a difficult time for me, to be honest, and obviously it's actually getting worse and worse, although I do feel that I've started to come to terms with it now, and I've now got to make the decision to get on with my life and carry on, either go to America, race Indy cars, or I quite fancy racing British touring cars or maybe German touring cars with the Class 1s.
Well, I know the feelings, and well, after 10 or so years I've come to terms with it, and the biggest thrill I have at Grand Prix weekends is working for Eurosport, talking about the sport for me that I love so much.
Yes, but of course I can understand that, John, because you're so much older than me.
I know, but I look so young.
Well, that's a good time to go for a commercial break then. With Damon Hill leading on lap 32 in front of Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger, Rubens Barrichello, Jean Alesi and Mika Häkkinen. We'll be back very shortly. Welcome back with Michael Schumacher in second place behind Damon Hill, and there's retirement from Gerhard Berger. A Ferrari out of the British Grand Prix. Into third place goes Rubens Barrichello.
Well, Barrichello will be very happy indeed, and he's got a fairly comfortable third place. Almost 9 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi. But Schumacher and Hill, unfortunately for Rubens, sufficiently out of the way.
You're looking at David Coulthard, who is now in 5th position. He has overtaken Mika Häkkinen and some 20 other guys. So David is doing very well from that last position on the grid.
Well, as I said at the start of a race, when you start, as David Coulthard had to do at the very back, you just purge your mind of all your preconceptions about how you're going to drive the Grand Prix. You free yourself up and you just drive as if this could be the last lap of the race. And the result is David is now in 5th place.
Lapping some 3 seconds a lap quicker than Jean Alesi was. And, well, this is not a replay of the start, but, John, there is more and more talk coming from the officials that it was something to do either with the start or with the warm-up lap, because he did overtake Damon Hill, and as far as I'm concerned, you're not allowed to overtake on that warm-up lap.
Well, he was darting backwards and forwards. We saw that particularly around the back of the circuit, out of Club up into Abbey, and maybe just this time there's been a little bit too much smartness from the Benetton Ford team, and you know, psychology and a little bit of intimidation may well have been the reason for Michael Schumacher to receive that 5-second stop-go penalty. It's certainly something that we've not seen applied before. It's going to alert a lot of other people to the same situation.
The problem is when you're on the front row, it's so obvious.
And that's the reason why you should be a little bit more careful. And also, you know, the knowledge of the rules and regulations is as important today. In fact, even more so, because the rules, regulations are applied much more vigorously than we've seen maybe 10 years ago. And any infringement whatsoever is stamped upon. Normally it's a bit of revenue gathering for the FIA, but nonetheless, that's the way the sport is now controlled. There are rules and regulations there, and if you make an error, you will be penalised.
After 34 laps, the gap between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher is 18.5 seconds. You see the gap between Alesi and Coulthard. That is after 33 laps, because currently the gap is only 2.3 seconds. There you see Jean Alesi, and behind him on the right, the blue car, that's David Coulthard.
Well, Coulthard certainly charging very hard, and with Alesi now very much in the sights. It's not that far after Alesi up to Rubens Barrichello now. Barrichello and Alesi on last lap 35 dropped down to the 1 minute 31 second range, whereas race leaders Hill and Schumacher high 27, Damon low 28. So I assume that what we didn't see is that Barrichello and Alesi were in traffic, and of course then Coulthard's going to be confronted with that same problem.
there is David Coulthard, and that gap is not even 2.3 seconds anymore, John.
Well, it's just a blink of the eye, and I think Coulthard will prepare himself for a move on Alesi. The best place I think he can do that would be to try and get as close as he can up to Beckett's, and then get a really good charge out of Beckett's, and hope that he's close enough to do something under brakes into Stowe. If not, well, you'll have to think again.
Also, I do think most teams are on a two-stop race strategy, because the first stop was on lap 14 and 15, and we're now on lap 36, and we haven't seen a stop since. So I suppose, John, one more stop around lap 40 and then go through to the end.
Well, I think that's the flexible strategy that teams are now playing. They're not saying we are going to do this and then that's it. They're looking at options all the time, and I think that's what you have to do, because races are not predictable. Circumstances change. Who would have imagined Schumacher getting a 5-second stop-go penalty? How would you put that into your formula or mechanical or mathematical model for a Grand Prix?
Damon Hill passed the man running in 16th position, Olivier Beretta, now 2 laps behind the race leader. And Michael Schumacher currently some 17 seconds behind this man. The Rothmans Williams Renault, and for everybody here, I think a big cheer will go up if Damon Hill does win. I mean, the cheer that went up when he drove onto the grid was just amazing.
Well, it would undoubtedly be an absolutely magnificent result for the British Grand Prix and for Damon Hill personally. And I think the response that Damon has illustrated since the French Grand Prix, and bearing in mind that he was very unhappy indeed with the speculation from the British press, and he actually for once expressed his feelings in a way that was very clear, and a few of those good old journos were rocking on their heels. They've never seen Damon talk to them like that. Wonderful, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Well, there we see David Coulthard, and the camera shot we see here, that is the one I like, and I think that probably comes closest to a driver's eye view, Derek.
Yeah, it's a good camera shot, and it's obviously they're improving things all the time. But you can see that David now is trying to find out the weakness of the Ferrari and lining them up. Here we have now.
Well, just, Derek, I was going to say, you've raced with Alesi. He's another hard nut. How do you find a way past the guy? He's not going to give you an inch, and particularly on brakes. The guy brakes so late, you think he's gone too deep.
Yeah, obviously the Ferrari's directors install it in their drivers, because both these two drivers are the most difficult on the circuit, and Alesi's not going to give it easy to David. He's going to have to really work hard and be careful, because people like Alesi, they take no prisoners, and they're out there to race, and they're a very hard racer.
Well, how would you say Alesi will try to dissuade David Coulthard from overtaking? I mean, what little tricks would he do with Coulthard so close behind him to unnerve him, to try and make him uncertain about what Alesi himself will do?
Well, what he's going to do is, as you see now, he's going to take the racing line. He's going to abuse that to his advantage.
And that's Damon Hill into the pits for his second stop on the end of lap 38. Damon, the first pits, the Williams first pits in the pit lane. So second stop, fuel into the car.
And also Michael Schumacher in the pits. So both Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill into the pits. That was an 8-second stop. There you see it, Michael Schumacher coming to a standstill now. And how long is this stop? Michael gained 2 seconds and a half coming in, and a little bit here. So I would say Michael gaining around 1.5 seconds over Damon Hill in this pit stop.
Well, this is the run now, in my opinion, to the end. So I think we've seen the last of the pit stops for Damon Hill and for Michael Schumacher. So 2 stops it's going to be. But this battle, Jean Alesi, David Coulthard. Now, Derek, we were talking about Coulthard and Alesi. His momentum has been lost. Really, in some situations, Coulthard should just drop back maybe a second or so, then pick up his own pace and rush back up to Alesi and try and catch him maybe a little bit unawares.
Yeah, you're right. Once you start to lose your rhythm in a race car, it's very difficult to pick it up. And yes, you're right, he should hang back, but the temptation will be to stay there because he keeps on seeing a little hole here or there, and he's obviously going to try and use that.
Now he's got the chance because traffic ahead of Alesi. Slow to Alesi down, he's coming up, under the rear wing, dive out to the right, he's made it. David Coulthard alongside, coming into Stowe, but Alesi's not giving way. Alesi, amazingly, when David Coulthard, in my mind, had got that position, just drove the long way around the corner. There's a lesson for you, David Coulthard.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, that's typical Alesi. He's there. He hang on. I mean, it's going to be a big mistake that will allow David through, and that will now slow him down a little bit. He'll lose even more rhythm. He'll take breath now and have another go in a couple of laps. Although what he's seeing is he's now catching up the Minardi, and that will obviously give him another chance maybe to take a run on him.
Well, I actually think David will come into the pits fairly soon, John, because David Coulthard's got to make another pit stop, and the Ferrari maybe not.
Well, the easiest thing to do is pass somebody in the pits during a pit stop, but we have to see what Alesi's strategy is. We do think it's only going to be one stop. Coulthard into the pit lane now for his second stop, and Allard sitting back happy as a sandboy because he called that one right.
So David Coulthard in fifth position. He will lose that. He will drop down probably quite a long way to maybe 9th or 10th place, even if he's not careful. So Coulthard in the pits. The car will be stationary for roughly 8 seconds. Oh, that's a bit longer, 9 seconds, and off he goes again. So the gap after 39 laps is 15.4 seconds. So there's just under 20 laps to go. Is it enough for Damon Hill to win the British Grand Prix?
Oh, well, in my view, Damon's got a reasonably comfortable lead. The fact of Michael Schumacher running marginally quicker than him, he will be advised by his team precisely what is happening with the Benetton Ford of Michael Schumacher. But 15 seconds, 19 in fact laps remaining. Pretty daunting task at the pace race leader and second place man are running at.
16.2 seconds. The gap, Barrichello third, fourth Alesi, Häkkinen fifth, and Coulthard still in sixth. We'll be back after the break here on Eurosport. Welcome back here on Eurosport. Derek, see you later. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. And Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher by 16.8 seconds after 41 laps, 19 to go. Barrichello still third on our computer, but he has made a pit stop, as is Jos Verstappen. Verstappen currently in sixth, but he will lose that sixth position due to the pit stops, and then he's got 18 laps to go till the end of the race.
Well, we're in a little moment of quietness here now because those pit stops broke up the battle, that wonderful battle between Alesi and David Coulthard, and I think that David will certainly finish this Grand Prix the wiser. He's been into the Alesi University of overtaking, and certainly the master of late braking showed that he does not concede to a young 23-year-old from Scotland who thinks because he's driving a Williams Renault that third place automatically should be his.
18 cars are still running in this Grand Prix. The last retirement is Gerhard Berger. And there we see Jean Alesi in fourth, 6.2 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen. And behind Häkkinen it's Frentzen, Coulthard, Verstappen and Katayama. And Frentzen, John, I think he was on a one-stop race as well. I'm pretty sure he was, actually.
Well, I think Sauber probably went for the conservative approach. And on that subject, it does appear that Mercedes-Benz are looking around for another team to provide the power plant that Ilmor V10 design built, V10 engine, and so expect in 1995 to see that engine in what has been described to me as a leading Formula One team. Now, you have to be Einstein to work out how many of those there are. So Sauber and another team going to be Mercedes-Benz powered in 1995.
Well, Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher lapping 1:28.9 and 1:29.3. So Damon actually being the quicker of the two at the moment, and of course did set fastest lap on lap 11, a 1:27.100. And that is a new lap record, because every fastest lap is a new lap record on this new circuit. But John, Damon basically as quick as Michael Schumacher if there's no traffic. Also, these two are lapping so much quicker than anybody else.
Well, Damon Hill has this Grand Prix very much in his control at the minute, and he can vary his pace. If Schumacher starts to cut into the current 17-second lead, then Damon responds, and he only has to run at that pace. And, well, lap 44, 16 remaining of this year's Grand Prix. And it's only now in these moments coming up to lap the slower cars that he has to be careful, because, as we have said in the past, if you get trapped between two or three of them, and there you see, in fact, it's David Coulthard, his teammate, who's the lead car of that group of cars. Frentzen now just behind Coulthard, and one of the Ligiers, and then Damon Hill, race leader. Well, that's a pretty fast pace, as we have mentioned. Damon Hill's last lap, 1 minute 28.906, against teammate David Coulthard, 1 minute 30.422.
Well, although he's, let's say, maybe only in 6th position, John, David's driving a very good race.
He drove a great race, bearing in mind the problems he had at the start when that engine stalled. He made a charge back up through the field, and it was just a great shame that battle that went on between Coulthard and Alesi had to be punctuated by the pit stops. Well, that's the strategy of Formula One these days.
Well, David Coulthard losing something like 43 seconds after lap 1 over Damon Hill. So 43 seconds, well, he could have been third if only, but if only don't give points in motor racing. 17.4 seconds the gap, we'll see there.
Well, it looks very much to me as if Michael Schumacher has shown us his hand, and he's not capable of running any harder than he is. The gap at the end of lap 45, 17.4 seconds. And that's a very marginal increase on the previous lap. And, well, that's basically down to who you meet at what particular part of the circuit. So if everything remains stable and constant, all Damon Hill has to do is now just get into the countdown to lap 60, and then, well, I don't want to anticipate what we might see, but it's certainly what the tens of thousands of people that have come to this British Grand Prix at Silverstone will be hoarse from cheering from.
Well, Damon Hill passing Heinz-Harald Frentzen, going into club, and Coulthard is actually not only lapping quicker than the race leader at the moment, but also he's 18 seconds behind Barrichello, but a second and a half quicker with 15 laps to go. That could well be an interesting finish, because Barrichello was only just over half a second behind Mika Häkkinen in 4th.
Well, that will be a little battle royal going on between the McLaren Peugeot and the Jordan Hart. Gap now at the end of lap 45, a tenth of a second more, 0.633. But in reality, it is visually the same. Well, we've been denied the opportunity to see that little battle as we watch race leader coming up to put a lap on his teammate, and that is the distance, some 4 seconds between Coulthard, who is running in 6th place, and race leader Damon Hill.
Well, Damon losing a little time there, but Schumacher losing even a little more. Now 30.0, and again David Coulthard being a couple of tenths quicker than his team leader. Well, 25 races, his 26th Grand Prix, and it is actually his 3rd British Grand Prix.
Well, the first one, of course, was in a Brabham, and as the new book that's been published about Damon Hill indicates, that starting at the back of the grid in a Brabham is not half as easy as starting in pole position in a Williams. And it's From Zero to Hero is the name of the book. But again, moment of caution for Damon, or for David Coulthard, I should say, not to be too ambitious in trying to put a further lap on the Minardi. And you know, sometimes if you're not sure, it is better to hesitate. Other times, if you're not sure, it's better to go. You just make that judgment at the particular point.
Well, Coulthard losing a little bit of time, passing Pierluigi Martini, in the Minardi. Or was it Alboreto?
Well, there's the battle between 4th and 5th place, Mika Häkkinen, and it looks to me as Häkkinen is gradually eking out a little bit more time over 5th place Rubens Barrichello. So Mika Häkkinen on a circuit he is so familiar with, although it is heavily revised, but thousands and thousands of testing miles for McLaren last year, and this year when the McLaren team changed over to Peugeot Power, this is the man that's done the bulk of the development work and through bridge for, well, the umpteenth time.
Häkkinen, Barrichello and Coulthard, the last of the unlapped runners. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the first of those. The gap still 17.5 seconds, so with 13 laps to go, the gap is 17.72 seconds. Then it's Alesi in 3rd, Häkkinen 4th, Barrichello 5th, and David Coulthard still in 6th. But what is the gap between Coulthard and Barrichello? That is some 14.9 seconds. He's gaining more than a second a lap at the moment, and it could be possible for his grandstand finish between old Formula 3 and Opel Lotus sparring partners Rubens Barrichello and David Coulthard. We'll be back after the great while you look at the top 6 on the Eurosport screen. We've given you the gaps. They are around 16.4, 17 seconds. There's the rest of the top 12. And we still have 18 cars running here at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. We're going to take a short break here on Eurosport. Please rejoin us after that for a grandstand finish to the British Grand Prix 1994. Welcome back here on Eurosport. That is race leader Damon Hill at the end of lap 60. 10 laps to go for the Williams Renault. His teammate David Coulthard right in front of him, and David is in 6th position, running, well, roughly the same pace as his team leader. I wonder what the backmarkers would think, John. They might think Coulthard is leading in front of Hill.
Well, I suppose that is possible, but one thing's for sure, Damon Hill knows where he is in the track, and equally David Coulthard will be fully aware that his teammate is now on the verge of putting him one lap down, but as you say, running very similar lap times, there is no need presently for Damon Hill to put his teammate a lap down, because Michael Schumacher, well, he's reduced the gap now down to 15.9 seconds. But it's almost academic. The only danger is, of course, that Michele Alboreto is out of the Grand Prix this year, and that's his Minardi Ford off the side of the track. As you see, very delicately detaches the radio. The umbilical cord just snaps it away. But this is the view Damon has coming through Bridge Corner, looking forward to his teammate David Coulthard. But really just keeping your eye on your pit board, keeping information between you and the team, and, well, let David run ahead of you. As long as you don't get tied up with slower cars that you're lapping, I can't see any problem keeping the situation as it is.
Well, Coulthard on that lap at 29.9 and Damon Hill 29.8. And what is Michael Schumacher doing on his lap? The gap was 15.9. The gap is now 17.1 seconds again.
Well, I think Damon is actually going to try and put that lap on Coulthard, because Coulthard got a little bit held up through Beckett's. Pierluigi Martini was the reason, and that's really allowed Damon to get right onto the gearbox. But of course Martini just takes the line. Damon has to back off, pulls up and alongside Martini as they break into club, and now Damon as close as he's been at any point to David Coulthard. And I would imagine that David is now being a good team player. He will swallow his pride and let Damon Hill get through, because that little moment with Pierluigi Martini has changed the situation. In my view, that would be in the interests of the team to allow Damon to go forward, maintain his pace and not get bogged down. Oh, and yes, David very gentlemanly stays well over to the left. Well done, David Coulthard. That was intelligent use of your racing brain, something that sometimes is lacking in motor racing. And Damon now able to pull away Michael Schumacher on that last lap with 17.1 seconds in arrears. We wait for Schumacher to come across the line at the end of the 53rd lap. As you revert back to Mika Häkkinen and Rubens Barrichello, that battle for fourth place still favouring Häkkinen. Gap is 1.5 seconds.
So Häkkinen running fourth, 1 minute and 14 seconds behind race leader Damon Hill, but 12.1 seconds only behind third place man Jean Malaysia. Rubens Barrichello 1.5 seconds behind Mika Häkkinen with 8 laps to go. Well, I think it's going to be fairly static until the end of the race. And John, ironic that Häkkinen in fourth position, the car running well, or as well as they probably expected to run, and Martin Brundle after 100 yards, big bang.
Well, that's, if you like to call it, Hobson's choice or fate, one of the two. It could so easily have been Mika Häkkinen that was in that sad situation we saw Martin Brundle, but well, you win some and you lose some, and when things go for you, fortune smiles. And Mika Häkkinen driving, I think, right on the limit of the performance of that Peugeot engine and the McLaren chassis, even though in its Evolution 2 phase still not capable of matching Ford horsepower, Renault horsepower, and being pushed quite severely by Hart V10 power.
Damon Hill on that lap, incidentally, John, at 28.9 over Michael Schumacher's 29.8. So when the track's clear, I think the Williams is actually quicker than the Benetton at this stage of the race.
Well, it just comes down to where you are on the track and the traffic around you, and it only takes one car at the wrong part of the track at the wrong time for you to lose a second or so, and that's the seesaw that we've really seen since the last round of pit stops, but in reality since Michael Schumacher was given the black flag. It was given it, then it was withdrawn, then it was, I think, reissued, and then Schumacher had to accept that there was an infringement of the technical regulations, and he came in for a 5-second stop-go penalty, and from that point onwards, really, the race for the lead was over.
So the car's running low on fuel, and I think we can see that quite a few cars are picking up speed. Rubens Barrichello got into the 129s, also Hill still in the 28s, Schumacher 29s, and so does David Coulthard.
Well, I don't know why Rubens has suddenly picked up a little bit of speed. I suspect maybe the information that Coulthard is running him down might have something to do with it, but on the other hand, maybe there was a problem with the car or something that he wasn't able to do anything with the car when it had been refueled, but as the fuel load begins to lighten, sometimes performance, balance and handling return.
There we see the gap on our screen, and John, I wonder whether we're going to see an invasion of the circuit as we saw in 1992 when Nigel Mansell, of course, won this Grand Prix.
Well, I think there will be joy and delight all around the circuit, but of course with the new debris fencing that is around the circuit, that's the mandatory debris fencing that each Grand Prix circuit must install to be given a Grand Prix license. It is now a lot more difficult for fans to get on to the circuit, and I think we'll see certainly a lot of people trying to get on. Whether they're successful, well, I don't want to anticipate what might happen.
Five laps to go for the Williams twins, and there we see Coulthard and Hill running together. Now, John, if they come to the last corner, it would be wise for Damon Hill to let David Coulthard pass again, because if anyone retires on that last lap in front of Coulthard, he will pick up points and places.
Well, that is a decision for the team, and they obviously must make that consideration. But something that really, I think, in the minds right now of the entire Hill family, and they're all here, Betty, Bridget, Samantha, Georgie Hill, of course, is that never before did a Hill win a British Grand Prix. Father Graham was denied his chance of winning here on many occasions, and Damon put his name on that very coveted trophy.
To go for Damon Hill. He is a long way in front of Michael Schumacher, and behind Damon Hill we see David Coulthard. He's 1 lap behind and 11 seconds behind fifth place man Rubens Barrichello. And I think, John, unless Hakkinen and Barrichello decide to hold each other up big time, that is not going to change.
Well, the gap has closed a little bit between Mika Hakkinen in fourth and Rubens Barrichello in fifth. So that battle very much joined as we again get a view from the front of David Coulthard's car looking towards his teammate Damon Hill. And of course, Damon now not relaxing, not unwinding, but certainly very much aware that victory is within his grasp. Coming down on the 57th time into Abbey Corner. Quite a change from the Silverstone circuit that we had since 1991. But with the development and the improvement to the cars in the space of one Grand Prix, in qualifying we saw a pace that really would have been a good time for a midfield team in last year's Grand Prix.
Well, John, talking about changing the circuit, it's a very different circuit to when you won here in 1981.
Well, in those days the circuit was very much that of the previous or the original Silverstone circuit. Very high speed corners at Beckett, Stowe and Club, as well as Abbey. And there you see something which I enjoyed in 1981, the full support all round the circuit from the many thousands of fans who came here in anticipation of a very precious moment indeed in the Grand Prix career of Damon Hill.
So David Coulthard has unlapped himself again. There we see the gap between Barrichello and Mika Hakkinen. They are some 12 seconds ahead of this man, David Coulthard, who will try whatever he can in these last couple of laps to, well, close the gap. And we're always hoping for more points anyway. Michael Schumacher, there we see him behind Heinz-Harald Frentzen. former Mercedes Junior team teammate. And could they be reunited one day in a Mercedes-powered Formula One car, John?
Well, there's not stranger than Formula One, and you come up with the most unbelievable combination of engines and chassis and drivers, it's worth a bet. And there's the battle that really we've been waiting to see, because Barrichello now right up to the rear wing of Mika Häkkinen's McLaren Peugeot, and the gap as they came across the line, 0.6 of a second. But really the difference in performance between the two V10 engines, Peugeot and Hart, probably nothing at all. It just comes down to the chassis differences, and that between these two young men, and these are the future stars of Grand Prix racing. But getting up to Mika Häkkinen and getting past Mika Häkkinen, entirely different situation.
2 laps to go for race leader Damon Hill. There we see Coulthard passing Christian Fittipaldi, and there, well, it's basically a lap and a half to go for Damon Hill, because he's going through Stowe into Club, what used to be just about flat right.
Well, in the old days, now going back to the early 80s, in qualifying trim, qualifying tyres, mind you, not with the horsepower we have today, it was just about on. It was talked about being flat. I think maybe half a dozen drivers did take it flat. And well, those are the reasons why we've seen 2 major revisions to the circuit. And if had we the circuit that I won the Grand Prix in 1981 is still in use, I dread to think the lap speed we'll be seeing today.
Well, on that circuit, John, the average speed of the Grand Prix was nearly 150 miles an hour. So, the final lap for Damon Hill. The crowd is cheering him on. Well, if anything, please do not break anything on that car. David Coulthard is there. And Damon Hill, well, John, you've had this. This is a great feeling. Coulthard is lapped again, by the way.
Well, this is a moment that Damon Hill will enjoy for the rest of his life. That's the last lap of your British Grand Prix, and this, I don't want to say it, is Damon Hill's first victory, but he is on course for that. And for the entire Hill family, Damon's mother, his sisters, but most importantly Georgie, his wife, and their children, this is something that I know when they become grandparents will look back and say, well, do you remember that day in 1994 when
Daddy
Happy, whatever, won his British Grand Prix? You can look back and it will provide joy for decades.
Well, Damon, Georgie, Betty and Damon's sister all here. Joshua is watching back home, and both the kids are watching back home here on Eurosport, and Georgie said, please say hello to my boys. So here we do, because Damon has won the British Grand Prix for the very first time in his career. It's his 5th Grand Prix victory, and Damon Hill is closing the gap again with World Championship leader Michael Schumacher, who is going to finish in 2nd position. There he is, crossing the line in his Benetton Ford. It's Williams Renault, Benetton Ford, Ferrari, McLaren Peugeot, Jordan Hart and another Williams Renault. Well, that's good, isn't it?
Well, a great result for Damon Hill. A fine result indeed, and a result that will give the Williams Renault team the kind of confidence and pride, really, and they've had the most difficult of seasons. Again, one has to say that Damon did benefit from the misfortune, or let's say the misjudgment, this time misjudgment of Michael Schumacher. But it doesn't matter. That is part of Grand Prix racing. Everybody is responsible for their actions, and if somebody makes an error and they suffer penalty, it is down to them.
John, you can't see it on your screen. There's an almighty battle going on between Mika Häkkinen and Rubens Barrichello. Going out of left field there.
And Barrichello,
they touched.
Barrichello has barged.
-1 wheel. There he goes, -1 wheel. Don't go into the pits, Rubens. Just carry on. Go finish the race.
Well, in fact, he may well finish the race in the pit lane because Mika Häkkinen and Barrichello had contact there, you see. And Mika Häkkinen's car, well, he's got the engine's running. He is going to get across the start-finish line.
Well, is Mika going to make it, or is Rubens going to make it? Is it Mika or Rubens? Mika is accelerating hard. This is going to be close.
Mika Häkkinen. Grandstand finish.
It's Häkkinen who's crossed the line just in front of Rubens Barrichello, I think.
Well, that was a race literally to the last corner, and contact occurred. It was inevitable because they were both absolutely committed. And, well, I just wonder what Ron Dennis is going to say to Eddie Jordan about that, because I'm quite sure there will be words passed. But, you know, when young guys are racing like that, you've got to expect it.
Well, if, John, if Coulthard would not have let Damon pass him and go a lap down, the lap times indicate he would have easily made up those 10 seconds he was running behind them and get 4th position on the silver plate. But if, Damon Hill's won the Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher finished 2nd, Jean Alesi 3rd, Mika Häkkinen 4th, Rubens Barrichello 5th, and David Coulthard in 6th position. I'm also happy to say Katayama 7th, Frentzen 8th, Jos Verstappen finished his first Grand Prix in 9th position, and Fittipaldi 10th. Well, that doesn't seem like a happy man.
No, I think Michael Schumacher expressed his emotions and feelings as he entered pit lane. He booted his Benetton forward, but now the cheers and the applause all round the circuit as Damon Hill makes his majestic way down in the pit lane. A huge Union Jack held high above his head, completely covering the rear of the bodywork of that Williams Renault. And there you see the pictures from the fans all around Silverstone. Damon, proud as punch, the first time the name Hill will be on the trophy as a winner of the British Grand Prix.
There is Michael Schumacher congratulating Damon Hill. And John, in all fairness, Michael lost time during that stop-and-go penalty, but eventually finished 19 seconds behind the race winner Damon Hill. This is the current situation in the championship. Now, it would have been close even if he not have had that 5-second stop.
Well, I think, you know, ifs and ands and buts, we don't know what would have happened, but there you can see absolute joy. And, well, Georgie Hill will most certainly be giving him a good old chamois off this evening, because Damon swathed in sweat, but look at the joy